Hello viewers, welcome to Sleepy Mind Channel. Tonight, we'll be exploring one of the most loving bird, owls. Imagine standing in a completely dark forest. It's the dead of winter. The air is so still that you can hear your own heart beating in your chest. Suddenly, a predator with a wingspan of over 3 feet flies right past your ear. How much noise do you think it makes? A swoosh? A flutter? A gust of wind? The terrifying and beautiful truth is, you wouldn't hear a single thing. Not a whisper, not a sound. By the time you realized it was there, it would already be gone. Welcome to the world of the owl, nature's ultimate stealth bomber. To understand how an owl achieves this absolute silence, we have to look at the miraculous engineering of their feathers. If you look at a pigeon or a falcon taking off, you hear that frantic flap, flap, flap. That noise is caused by air rushing over the hard edges of their feathers, creating microscopic sonic booms, turbulence. But the owl has evolved a 3-part system that completely breaks the laws of aviation as we know them. First, the leading edge of an owl's primary flight feathers has a row of stiff, comb-like bristles. When an owl flaps its wings, these bristles break down the turbulent air into smaller, microcurrents. Second, the rest of the feather is covered in a soft, velvety texture, almost like the fuzz on a peach. This velvet absorbs the sound of the feathers rubbing together. Finally, the trailing edge of the feather is fringed and tattered, allowing those microcurrents of air to slip away quietly instead of popping off the edge. Scientists and engineers have spent decades trying to replicate this. In fact, the aerodynamic design of the owl's wing was studied to reduce the noise of the Shinkansen bullet trains in Japan, and it is currently being studied to design quieter wind turbines and stealth aircraft. But beyond the science, there is something deeply profound about the owl's silence. We live in a world that is obsessed with noise. We are constantly surrounded by the buzz of traffic, the ping of notifications, the loud voices of people trying to be heard. We equate power with volume. The loudest person in the room often gets the most attention. The loudest engines are seen as the most powerful. The owl teaches us a different kind of power, the power of moving through life without needing to announce your presence, the power of observation. It reminds us that sometimes the most effective way to navigate the dark, complicated forests of our own lives is to quiet down, stop making a fuss, and glide. There is a terrifying grace in silence. The owl doesn't need to roar to be the king of the night sky. Its silence is its strength. Take your fingers and place them on your ears. They are perfectly symmetrical, right? Level with your eyes, mirrored on both sides of your head. Now, imagine if someone's face was constructed so that their right ear was up near their eyebrow and their left ear was down by their jawline. It sounds like a mistake of nature. It sounds like a deformity. But for the owl, this bizarre physical trait is the key to a superpower that borders on magic. They don't just hear the world, they map it in 3 dimensions. While the owl's eyes are legendary, its hearing is arguably its greatest weapon. Many species of owls, like the barn owl and the great gray owl, have entirely asymmetrical ears. One ear opening is situated higher on the skull, and the other is lower. Why? Because it allows the owl to calculate the exact, pinpoint location of a sound using a mathematical concept humans rely on computers for. When a mouse snaps a twig deep beneath 2 feet of solid snow, the sound wave travels up into the air. Because the owl's ears are uneven, that sound reaches one ear a fraction of a millisecond before it reaches the other. It also hits the ears at different volumes depending on the angle. The owl's brain calculates this microscopic difference in time and volume instantly. But nature didn't stop there. Take a look at an owl's face. It looks flat, right? That flat face, called a facial disc, is actually shaped exactly like a satellite dish. The stiff feathers on the edge of the face funnel sound waves directly into those uneven ears. An owl can be sitting 50 feet up in a tree, blindfolded by total darkness, and hear the heartbeat of a vole hiding under a foot of snow, locking onto its exact coordinates before it even launches from the branch. Think about what it means to truly listen. In our human relationships, how often do we listen just to reply? We hear the words our friends or partners are saying, but we are just waiting for our turn to speak. We miss the subtle tones, the hesitation, the quiet cries for help hidden beneath the surface. The owl's survival depends on listening to what is hidden. It hears what cannot be seen. Imagine if we applied even a fraction of that asymmetrical focus to our own lives. What if we tuned our facial discs to the people we love, ignoring the noise of the wind and the world, and listened deeply enough to hear the things they are burying beneath the surface? The owl reminds us that true listening is an active, life-saving skill. It is about tuning into the frequencies that the rest of the world ignores. We've all seen it in horror movies. The possessed girl spins her head entirely backward to look at the priest. It is a universal symbol of the unnatural, the impossible. If a human tries to turn their head past their shoulder, they will tear muscles, snap vertebrae, and sever the arteries supplying blood to the brain. Yet an owl does this casually. It can rotate its head a staggering 270 degrees in either direction. That means an owl can look over its left shoulder, keep turning, and end up looking over its right shoulder without moving its body. How does it not snap its own neck? To understand this biological marvel, we first have to understand the owl's greatest weakness: its eyes. Unlike human eyeballs, which are perfectly round and can roll around in our sockets, an owl's eyes are shaped like tubes. They are locked tightly into the skull by bony structures called sclerotic rings. An owl cannot roll its eyes. To look left or right, it must move its entire head. To compensate for this rigid vision, evolution gave the owl an incredible neck. While humans have 7 vertebrae in our necks, an owl has 14. This gives them a spine that is essentially as flexible as a snake. But the real magic is in the plumbing. If a human turns their head too far, the blood vessels get pinched off, cutting off oxygen to the brain. Owls, however, have special backup arteries. Their blood vessels actually get wider as they travel up the neck, creating little pools of blood right below the brain. When the owl twists its head and accidentally pinches an artery, these little reservoirs pump stored blood into the brain, keeping it fully oxygenated until the head returns to a normal position. There is a powerful metaphor hidden in the owl's locked eyes and flexible neck. As humans, we often suffer from a sort of tunnel vision in our own lives. We get locked into our opinions, our biases, and our narrow ways of seeing the world. We stare straight ahead, refusing to look at other perspectives because turning around is uncomfortable. The owl teaches us that if your vision is limited, your perspective must be infinitely flexible. Because the owl cannot change its eyes, it changes its angle. It is willing to twist, to turn, to completely invert its viewpoint to see the full picture. In a world where people are so rigid, so unwilling to look behind them or see things from a different angle, we could all learn from the owl. When life locks you in, don't force your eyes to change. Expand your perspective. Look around. The whole world is behind you, waiting to be seen, if only you are flexible enough to turn your head. If you look deeply into an owl's face, its eyes are mesmerizing. They are vast, pools of gold, orange, or obsidian black that seem to hold the wisdom of the universe. But what if I told you that the phrase owl eyeballs is scientifically completely incorrect? Because owls, despite having some of the most powerful visual organs on the planet, do not actually possess eyeballs at all. If you could strip away the feathers and look at the anatomy, you would find something far stranger and far more powerful. To master the night, the owl had to sacrifice the standard anatomy of a bird. Instead of spherical eyeballs like humans or most other animals, an owl's eyes are elongated cylinders, essentially built-in binoculars. These visual tubes are so incredibly large that they can account for up to 5% of the owl's entire body weight. If humans had eyes with the same body-to-weight ratio, we would be walking around with eyes the size of large grapefruits. Because these tubes are so massive, there is simply no room in the skull for muscles to move them around. That is why they are rigidly fixed in place by a bony structure called the sclerotic ring. But what they lack in mobility, they make up for in sheer light-gathering capability. The retina of an owl's eye is packed extraordinarily densely with rod cells, the photoreceptors responsible for detecting light and movement. While humans have a balance of rods and cones which detect color, owls have mostly rods. This means they see a world mostly in shades of gray, but they can see in lighting conditions that would render a human completely blind. A single candle burning in a vast, pitch-black stadium would provide enough illumination for a large owl to hunt successfully. Furthermore, they possess a reflective layer behind the retina called the tapetum lucidum. Any light that passes through the eye without hitting a rod cell bounces off this mirror and goes back through the retina a second time, giving the owl two chances to capture a single particle of light. This is why their eyes appear to glow in the dark when hit by a flashlight. There is an incredible lesson in the biology of the owl's eyes. Evolution forced the owl to make a trade-off. To gain absolute, unparalleled clarity in the darkest of nights, the owl had to give up the ability to see a wide spectrum of colors, and it had to give up peripheral vision. It sacrificed breadth for depth. We live in an era of constant distraction. We want to see everything, experience everything, and keep our eyes darting in 100 different directions at once. We want vibrant colors and constant stimulation. But sometimes, when the darkness of life closes in, that scattered vision fails us. The owl teaches us the profound value of singular focus. Sometimes, to navigate the darkest chapters of our lives, we need to strip away the distractions, stop looking at the chaotic periphery, and focus entirely on the tiny sliver of light ahead of us. True clarity doesn't come from seeing everything. It comes from deeply focusing on the one thing that matters. Think of the firmest handshake you have ever experienced. A strong grip commands immediate respect. It communicates presence and power. An average adult human can exert roughly 60 to 100 pounds of force per square inch with their hand. Now, imagine a grip so devastatingly powerful that it requires almost 30 pounds of leverage just to pry it open once it closes. Imagine a grip that functions like an industrial steel vise, capable of snapping bone in an absolute fraction of a second. The owl may be a silent, graceful phantom in flight, but the moment it makes contact, it becomes a ruthless executioner. The secret to the owl's lethal efficiency lies in its feet. Most birds have 3 toes pointing forward and 1 pointing backward, a setup perfect for perching on branches. Owls, however, possess a highly specialized anatomy known as zygodactyl feet. They have 2 toes pointing forward and 2 pointing backward. But here is the terrifyingly brilliant part. One of those outer toes is double-jointed. The owl can pivot it forward to perch comfortably, but the moment it swoops down on prey, it swivels that toe backward, creating a perfect 2x2 grappling hook. When a great horned owl strikes, its talons pierce the prey with an estimated force of 300 to 500 pounds per square inch. But the true marvel is the internal mechanism of their legs. Once the owl closes its talons around its prey, a specialized tendon mechanism ratchets into place, literally locking the toes shut. The owl doesn't have to flex its muscles to keep its grip tight. The talons remain clamped mechanically. It requires zero energy for the owl to hold onto a struggling animal. The prey is trapped in a biological bear trap from which there is no escape. There is a stark, brutal honesty in the way an owl secures its prize. The locking tendon is a marvel of commitment. Once the owl decides to strike, once it makes contact, it commits entirely. The lock engages, and the bird does not let go, no matter how hard the struggle gets. As humans, we often struggle with commitment. We grasp at goals, relationships, and dreams, but the moment things become difficult, the moment our hands get tired, our grip loosens. We rely on fleeting motivation to hold on to things, and when that motivation fades, we drop what we were fighting for. The owl's locking talons are a powerful metaphor for true conviction. When you find something truly worth pursuing, a dream, a purpose, a deep love, you cannot rely on the energy of the moment to hold it. You have to lock your intentions in place. You have to build a grip so strong and so deeply rooted in your core that holding on becomes second nature, requiring no extra energy, regardless of how fiercely the world tries to pull it away from you. Imagine standing right in front of someone, looking directly at them, and having absolutely no idea they are there. It's the ultimate superpower, true invisibility. We usually think of invisibility as a magical cloak or a high-tech science fiction suit. But in the dense forests, snowy tundras, and arid deserts of the real world, invisibility is an everyday reality. It doesn't require magic. It requires a mastery of stillness so profound that the creature simply ceases to be an animal and becomes the earth itself. Owls are masters of cryptic plumage, meaning their feathers are specifically patterned to mimic their exact surroundings. An eastern screech owl has feathers that replicate the rough, chaotic ridges and grayish-brown hues of tree bark. A snowy owl's stark white feathers make it virtually indistinguishable from a snowdrift in the Arctic. But plumage is only half of the equation. What makes owls truly invisible is their behavioral camouflage. When an owl feels threatened or wants to hide from daytime predators like hawks or crows, it doesn't just sit there hoping its colors work. It actively transforms its body shape. It will pull its feathers tightly against its body, making itself look incredibly thin. It will stand bolt upright to match the vertical lines of a tree trunk. It will close its brilliant, giveaway eyes to narrow, diagonal slits. Furthermore, if the wind blows and the tree branch begins to sway, the owl will perfectly synchronize its body to sway with the branch, mimicking a broken-off stub of wood moving in the breeze. They hold these agonizingly still poses for hours, suppressing every instinct to flee, trusting entirely in their disguise. Blending in is a concept humans are deeply familiar with. From the clothes we wear to the way we speak, we often camouflage our true selves to match the environment we are in. We do it to avoid judgment, to escape criticism, or to protect ourselves from a world that can often feel hostile to those who stand out. But while humans often view blending in as a loss of identity, a cowardly hiding of our true colors, the owl shows us the wisdom in adaptability. The owl does not lose its identity when it mimics tree bark. It is fiercely protecting its energy. It knows that it does not need to constantly display its power to be powerful. It reminds us that there are times in life when the smartest, strongest thing you can do is withdraw, quiet your spirit, and blend into the background. You don't have to be the loudest presence in the room. You can choose to be still, to observe without being observed, knowing full well that beneath the camouflage, your strength remains entirely intact, waiting for the perfect moment to take flight. Imagine if every single thing you ever consumed left an indelible, pristine record of its existence inside a time capsule in your stomach. Imagine if, instead of digesting everything into anonymity, your body kept a precise, physical museum of your past choices, waiting to be cast out into the world for others to study. To understand the owl, we have to look past its beautiful exterior and examine what it leaves behind. Because in the quiet corners of the forest floor, owls drop small, grayish bundles of fur and bone that act as the ultimate truth-tellers of nature. Owls do not possess teeth, which means they cannot chew their food. Depending on the size of their prey, they either swallow it entirely whole or tear it into massive, ragged chunks. This presents a massive digestive challenge. When an owl swallows a mouse, a vole, or a small bird, the meal travels down into a two-part stomach system. The first part is the glandular stomach, which secretes powerful acids to break down soft tissues, muscles, and nutrients. The second part is the gizzard, a highly muscular organ that acts like a biological trash compactor. The gizzard separates the digestible meat from the completely indigestible elements: the sharp bones, the dense fur, the feathers, the teeth, and the claws. While the nutritious juices pass further into the digestive tract, the gizzard compresses the remaining debris into a tight, felted, oval package known as an owl pellet. Several hours after eating, the owl will experience a series of rhythmic muscular contractions. It will tilt its head down, open its beak, and calmly regurgitate this pellet. For biologists and ecologists, these pellets are pure gold. Because the owl's stomach acid is less corrosive than that of other birds of prey, the bones inside the pellets are preserved in near-perfect, unbroken condition. By dissecting a single pellet, scientists can reconstruct the exact skeleton of the animal the owl ate. In fact, much of what we know about the populations of rare, nocturnal rodents and hidden small mammals comes not from trapping live animals, but from analyzing the historical archives dropped by owls. There is a profound psychological metaphor hidden within the biological necessity of the owl pellet. As humans, we all swallow difficult experiences whole. We internalize trauma, heartbreak, grief, and the harsh, jagged realities of life. Sometimes we mistakenly believe that to be strong, we must completely digest and absorb everything that happens to us. We try to turn the toxic or painful parts of our past into fuel. But the owl teaches us a healthier way to process life. It tells us that it is entirely natural and in fact life-saving to realize that some things are simply indigestible. You do not have to absorb every painful word someone said to you. You do not have to internalize every trauma. The wisdom of survival lies in extracting the nutrients, the lessons, the strength, the resilience, and gracefully casting away the heavy bones and fur of past hurts. True healing is the willingness to look at what didn't serve you, package it up, and leave it behind on the forest floor. We love to look at nests of baby birds and think of them as pure symbols of innocence, peace, and familial love. We picture parents gently feeding their adorable, identical offspring in perfect harmony. But look inside a wild owl's nest during a harsh winter or a season, when food is scarce, and you will witness a survival of the fittest drama so dark and uncompromising that it will challenge everything you think you know about nature's kindness. In the world of the owl, the battle for survival does not begin when they leave the nest. It begins the very second they hatch. Most birds practice synchronous hatching, meaning the mother waits until she has laid her entire clutch of eggs before she begins sitting on them to keep them warm. This ensures that all the babies develop at the exact same speed and hatch at the exact same time, creating an even playing field where all siblings are the same size. Owls, however, reject this fairness. They practice asynchronous hatching. The moment a female owl lays her very first egg, she begins incubating it immediately, because she lays her subsequent eggs over the course of several days, sometimes even a week apart. The chicks hatch in a staggered timeline. When the firstborn chick is already a week old, covered in thick down, and growing rapidly, its youngest sibling is just breaking through its shell as a tiny, blind, fragile pink speck. This creates a massive, intentional hierarchy of size and strength within the nest. If the environment is thriving and mice are abundant, the parents will bring home enough food to satisfy every single mouth. But if a drought hits and food becomes scarce, the parents do not distribute the food evenly. They will feed the largest, loudest, most aggressive chick first. If the famine deepens, the older, stronger siblings will actively bully, starve, and in desperate circumstances, attack, kill, and consume their younger brothers and sisters. This horrific behavior is known as facultative siblicide. From an evolutionary perspective, it is a brutal but brilliant insurance policy. Instead of a parent dividing limited food equally and causing the entire nest to die of malnutrition, nature ensures that at least one or two exceptionally strong chicks survive to carry on the bloodline. This is perhaps the hardest fact about owls for humans to reconcile with our sense of morality. It reminds us that nature operates on a cold, unyielding calculus that cares nothing for sentimentality or equality. We do not all enter this world with the same advantages. We do not all start from the same position on the track, and the resources available to us are often profoundly unequal. The owl's nest shows us life stripped down to its rawest, most primitive element. It forces us to acknowledge that sometimes survival requires an unapologetic, fierce focus on self-preservation. While human society must always strive for compassion, equity, and protecting the vulnerable, the owl reminds us of the sheer, terrifying weight of reality. It teaches us to respect the incredible, unseen battles that individuals fight just to survive their own environments. When you see a magnificent adult owl soaring through the night sky, you are not just looking at a beautiful bird. You are looking at a warrior that survived a ruthless, lifelong gauntlet from the very day it was born. Think of a time you walked into a room and felt an immediate, palpable wave of hostility from a crowd of people. You didn't do anything directly to harm them in that moment, but your very presence, your identity, or what you represented triggered a collective panic. In the avian kingdom, this exact social phenomenon plays out daily in a loud, chaotic, and fascinating ritual. It is a state of perpetual warfare where the daytime birds of the world band together to terrorize the phantoms of the night. Owls are apex predators when the sun goes down, but during the bright hours of the day, their biological advantages are heavily minimized. They want nothing more than to find a dense thicket of ivy or a hollow tree trunk, close their eyes, and sleep. But the rest of the animal kingdom never forgets what happens when darkness falls. Crows, jays, blackbirds, and even tiny songbirds know that the sleeping creature in the tree is a lethal threat to their lives and their nests. If a single crow spots a roosting great horned owl during the afternoon, it will not fly away in fear. Instead, it will let out a specific, frantic, harsh alarm call. This call acts as a universal beacon. Within minutes, birds from completely different species, birds that might normally fight each other, will form an uneasy alliance. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of birds will descend upon the owl's location in a behavior known as mobbing. The mobbing birds will circle the owl relentlessly, screaming at the top of their lungs, diving within inches of its face, snapping their beaks, and physically plucking at its feathers. They rarely try to kill the owl as it is still too dangerous, but their goal is psychological warfare. By making an absolute scene, they strip the owl of its greatest weapon: stealth. They draw attention to its hiding spot, making it impossible for the owl to rest or hunt. Eventually, exhausted, annoyed, and overwhelmed by the sheer, chaotic volume of the crowd, the majestic owl is forced to open its eyes, abandon its perch, and clumsily fly away in search of a quieter sanctuary. The mobbing of an owl is a striking biological mirror for the human experience of mob mentality and social envy. When you possess a unique talent, a distinct perspective, or a quiet power that sets you apart from the crowd, you will often find that the crows of the world will band together to loudmouth you. Notice that the smaller birds do not attack the owl because it is weak. They attack it precisely because they know how incredibly powerful it is when it operates in its true element. The noise they make is born entirely out of fear of what the owl can do when the lights go out. If you ever find yourself surrounded by critics, doubters, or a loud crowd of people trying to distract you, drain your energy, and force you off your perch, take a page from the owl's playbook. Do not waste your valuable energy fighting back against every single screaming crow. Do not stoop to their level of chaotic noise. Keep your composure, protect your peace, and understand that their hostility is simply an acknowledgement of your power. Let them scream during the day, because they know that when the sun sets and the true test begins, the night belongs entirely to you. Imagine walking into a nursery, looking down into a crib where a fragile, newborn infant is sleeping, and intentionally dropping a live, writhing snake right next to the baby. To human sensibilities, this sounds like an act of pure madness, if not outright malice. We view snakes as threats, as cold-blooded symbols of danger. Yet, in the hollow of an old oak tree, an eastern screech owl mother does this exact thing with calm, calculated precision. She brings a living predator into the cradle of her children, not to destroy them, but to serve as the ultimate hidden line of defense. This bizarre phenomenon is one of the most astonishing examples of mutualism and symbiosis in the avian world. The eastern screech owl is a small predator, and its nest, usually built in abandoned woodpecker holes, is a chaotic environment filled with the decaying remnants of dead mice, rotting frogs, and dropped pieces of meat. This organic decay inevitably attracts hordes of flies, ants, beetles, and hornets. The larvae of these insects feast on the refuse, but they also turn their attention to the helpless, soft-skinned owl chicks, biting them, draining their energy, and introducing deadly infections. To combat this, the parent owls hunt for Texas blind snakes, tiny subterranean reptiles that look more like oversized, glossy earthworms than traditional serpents. Normally, an owl would swallow such a creature instantly. But when a screech owl catches a blind snake during the nesting season, a fascinating behavioral shift occurs. The owl carries the snake back to the nest completely unharmed and drops it into the debris. Once inside the dark, hollow nest, the blind snake immediately does what millions of years of evolution have programmed it to do. It burrows into the leaf litter and organic waste. There, it begins to systematically hunt and devour the insect larvae, maggots, and parasites that are plaguing the owl chicks. The snake gets a safe, climate-controlled environment overflowing with an all-you-can-eat buffet of insects, entirely protected from the hawks and coyotes outside. The owl chicks, in turn, get a live-in housekeeper that sanitizes their cradle. Biologists tracking these nests have discovered that owl chicks raised in nests with pet snakes grow significantly faster, are much healthier, and suffer a vastly lower mortality rate than chicks raised in snake-free environments. There is a profound, beautifully unsettling lesson in the alliance between the screech owl and the blind snake. It forces us to confront our own deeply ingrained prejudices and assumptions. In our human lives, we often categorize the world into rigid boxes: friend or foe, good or bad, beautiful or ugly. We push away things that make us uncomfortable, things that look strange or feel foreign, assuming they have nothing to offer us. The owl teaches us a higher form of systemic wisdom. It shows us that survival isn't about surrounding yourself only with things that look like you or make you feel comfortable. It's about recognizing the unique value and utility in things that are completely different from you. The owl looks past the slithering, unsettling nature of the snake and sees a partner. It reminds us that sometimes the solutions to our most complex, deeply rooted problems come from the most unexpected places. If we are willing to drop our biases and look at the world with pragmatic, open-minded clarity, we might just find that the very thing we feared or misunderstood is exactly what we need to protect our future. When you close your eyes and visualize an owl, your mind instinctively creates a vertical image. You see a silhouette high up on a Gothic church spire, a phantom gliding over a moonlit canopy, or a stoic guardian perched on the branch of an ancient redwood. We categorize birds as creatures of the heavens, forever detached from the heavy, dirty realities of the earth below. But out in the wide open, wind-swept grasslands of North and South America, there is an owl that looks up at the sky with suspicion, choosing instead to build its kingdom deep within the dark, dusty womb of the earth itself. The burrowing owl is a radical subversion of everything we expect an owl to be. Standing at just 9 inches tall on long, stilt-like legs, this tiny bird has largely abandoned the vastness of the sky to live underground. While they are perfectly capable of flight, they spend the vast majority of their lives running, hopping, and nesting in subterranean tunnels. Because digging a complex tunnel system from scratch requires an immense amount of physical energy, these clever birds usually operate as nature's ultimate squatters. They move into abandoned burrows dug by prairie dogs, ground squirrels, tortoises, or badgers. If no pre-made homes are available, they will use their long legs and sharp talons to vigorously kick dirt backward, excavating their own tunnels up to 10 feet deep into the soil. Living underground presents a terrifying challenge. You are trapped in a dark pipe with only one exit, making you an easy target for subterranean predators like badgers, ferrets, and domestic dogs. To survive this, the burrowing owl has developed an array of psychological tricks. If a predator approaches the mouth of the burrow, the owl inside will emit a terrifying, rasping hiss that perfectly mimics the warning rattle of a highly venomous western diamondback rattlesnake. The sound echoes up the dirt tunnel, amplifying in volume, causing even the hungriest coyote to think twice and retreat in panic. Furthermore, these owls are industrious agriculturalists. They collect pieces of mammal dung and place them meticulously around the entrance of their burrows. This isn't a design choice. It is a highly sophisticated hunting trap. The dung attracts thousands of dung beetles and carrion beetles directly to the owl's front door, allowing the bird to sit comfortably in the shade of its home and harvest a constant stream of protein without ever having to expend energy flying around to hunt. The burrowing owl is a beautiful testament to the power of nonconformity. It is a bird that refused to let its anatomy dictate its destiny. By all traditional definitions, its place was in the trees, but its environment demanded a different strategy, and so it adapted to the dirt. In our human journeys, we are constantly bombarded by societal expectations of what we should be based on our background, our appearance, or our heritage. We are told that if we possess a certain talent, we must use it in a specific, approved way. We build mental cages for ourselves trying to fit into standard definitions of success. The burrowing owl reminds us that it is entirely acceptable to redefine your element. You can belong to a lineage of sky dwellers and still find your peace, your safety, and your prosperity in the dirt. It teaches us that thriving isn't about matching the stereotype of your species. It's about finding the environment where you can survive best, even if it means turning your back on the sky and digging your own path forward into the earth. It is a celebration of the unconventional, a reminder that true wisdom lies in creating a home that fits your reality, not someone else's fantasy. Paranoia is an exhausting, uniquely agonizing human experience. The constant, nagging sensation that someone is watching you from the shadows behind your back, waiting for you to drop your guard. We spend an immense amount of psychological energy trying to protect our blind spots, knowing that the world is often most dangerous when our backs are turned. But for a tiny owl no larger than a teacup, living in a forest teeming with massive hawks, falcons, and cats, paranoia isn't just a feeling. It is an evolutionary design requirement. To keep from being blindsided and executed from behind, this creature evolved a second, terrifying, unblinking face on the very back of its skull. The northern pygmy owl is an exceptionally fierce predator, capable of taking down prey twice its own size. However, because of its minuscule stature, it is also highly vulnerable to becoming prey itself. Large raptors see the pygmy owl as a quick, easy midday snack. Because these daytime predators rely entirely on the element of surprise to launch an ambush, they almost always attack an owl from behind, striking when the bird is looking the other way. To completely neutralize this threat, the northern pygmy owl evolved a stunning piece of anatomical deception known as occipital face or false eye spots. On the back of the owl's neck and skull, the feathers are pigmented and arranged in two large, stark, black circles framed by bright white borders. To an observer standing behind the owl, these feather patterns look exactly like a pair of massive, glaring, wide-open eyes. This illusion is so incredibly convincing that it completely rewires the behavior of potential predators and mobbing songbirds. When a hawk circles above, looking for an opportunity to ambush the pygmy owl from the rear, it looks down and sees what appears to be a fully alert, vigilant face staring directly back up at it. Because predators know that a direct attack on an alert animal is highly likely to fail or result in injury, the hawk will almost always abort the mission and fly away in search of an easier target. The false eyes also protect the owl from being harassed by songbirds. If a group of small birds thinks they have snuck up on a sleeping owl, they will attack. But when they see those massive, unblinking black spots on the back of the head, they assume the owl is locked onto them, causing them to keep their distance. The pygmy owl can literally sleep with its true eyes closed, entirely confident that its false face is keeping the world at bay. There is a powerful psychological parallel between the owl's false eyes and the defense mechanisms we develop as human beings. We all wear masks. We all construct external personas, faces of strength, indifference, or confidence, that we project to the world to hide our vulnerabilities. When we are hurting, tired, or feeling small, we put on our false face to ensure that the people around us don't see our exhaustion and take advantage of our weakness. The owl shows us that protective deception isn't a sign of cowardice. It is a brilliant strategy for conserving your energy and maintaining boundaries. You do not owe the world a view of your vulnerabilities at all times. It is entirely acceptable to create an outer shell that signals to the world that you are alert, strong, and not to be trifled with, even when you are quietly resting or healing on the inside. However, the deeper beauty lies in remembering that the false face is just feathers. Beneath the terrifying, unblinking spots on the back of the head is a fragile, delicate creature just trying to survive the day. The owl teaches us to respect the masks people wear, understanding that the loudest, most aggressive, or most intensely watchful fronts are often just an elegant shield protecting a very quiet, vulnerable center. Think about the classic, comforting sound of the night. A soft, rhythmic, echoing hoo-hoo-hoo drifting through a misty forest. It is the universal cinematic shorthand for nighttime peace. But if you were to step into a deserted barn in the dead of night and hear a barn owl for the very first time, your blood would run completely cold. Instead of a soothing hoot, you would be hit by a rasping, metallic, blood-curdling shriek that sounds like a person being violently hunted down. Owls possess a staggering, terrifying array of voices, and incredibly, just like humans, no two owls sound exactly the same. Owls do not possess vocal cords like humans. Instead, they produce sound using a specialized organ called a syrinx, located at the base of their trachea. Because different species have adapted to vastly different environments, their vocalizations vary wildly. While the great horned owl delivers the iconic deep bass hoots, screech owls produce an eerie, descending whinny that sounds like a ghostly horse. Ferruginous pygmy owls emit rapid, mechanical clicks, and some species can even mimic the maniacal laughter of a hyena. But the true scientific marvel occurs within individual species. Biologists using advanced acoustic software have discovered that owls possess unique, individual voice prints. When a male great horned owl hoots to declare his territory, the specific frequency, pitch, microdurations, and intervals of that hoot are entirely unique to him. This acoustic signature is so distinct that other owls living in the surrounding canopy recognize exactly who is speaking. They don't just hear a generic owl, they hear a specific neighbor. This allows a community of nocturnal predators to maintain strict territorial boundaries, resolve disputes, and identify intruders in pitch-black darkness without ever having to risk physical injury through blind combat. There is a beautiful, liberating lesson hidden within the vocal diversity of the owl. In our human lives, we often face immense pressure to conform to standard expectations. We try to mold our personalities, our expressions, and our literal voices to sound like the soothing hoots society deems acceptable, polite, or safe. We bury our sharp edges because we are afraid of making people uncomfortable. The owl completely rejects this pressure. A barn owl never tries to mimic a great horned owl to fit into the forest collective. It embraces its harsh, raw, unsettling shriek because that shriek is its biological truth. Furthermore, the concept of the individual voice print reminds us that no matter how crowded our professional field is, or how loud the world gets, our individual voice carries a frequency that cannot be replicated. You do not need to change your natural tone to be heard. The people, the opportunities, and the communities that are tuned to your specific frequency will recognize you in the dark, simply because you had the courage to speak in your own authentic voice. In our modern human culture, romance is frequently painted as a chaotic whirlwind of fleeting emotions, superficial matches, and temporary passions. We are told to constantly look for something better, and at the first sign of a heavy emotional winter, many human partnerships crumble under the strain. But deep within the quiet, unforgiving wilderness, away from relationship advice columns and romantic ideals, pairs of owls are quietly demonstrating a masterclass in absolute life or death devotion. For these apex predators, partnership isn't a casual contract. It is a lifelong survival covenant. A vast majority of owl species, including barn owls, great horned owls, and bald owls, are strictly monogamous and mate for life. This commitment is born out of evolutionary necessity. Raising a clutch of highly demanding, voracious owl chicks in a harsh environment is an exhausting, multi-month endeavor that a single parent simply cannot achieve alone. The process begins with an elaborate courtship ritual where the male woos the female through synchronized aerial displays, low-frequency duets, and targeted gifts of freshly hunted prey. Once the bond is sealed, it remains unbroken until death. Their shared life is defined by a flawless, deeply trusted division of labor. During the incubation period, the female is completely confined to the nest, sitting on the eggs for weeks at a time. During this phase, she is utterly dependent on the male for her survival. If the male fails to hunt, or if his commitment wavers, she will starve and the nest will fail. Understanding this weight, the male owl will hunt himself to the point of absolute physical exhaustion, prioritizing her nourishment above his own. They constantly communicate through soft, intimate duets, answering each other across the dark forest canopy to reaffirm their location and their bond. If an owl loses its mate to a predator or a human accident, the surviving partner will frequently display visible signs of distress, often refusing to seek a new mate for multiple seasons, and in some cases, living out the rest of its life entirely alone. The lifelong bond of the owl forces us to deeply reevaluate our human understanding of love and partnership. It reminds us that true alignment isn't about sharing only the bright, sunny, effortless chapters of life. It is about finding a co-pilot you can sit in the pitch-black dark with when the winter freeze sets in and resources are dangerously low. It is about developing a level of trust so absolute that you can allow yourself to be vulnerable and still know your partner will protect your blind spots and bring you sustenance when you are paralyzed by your responsibilities. In a world that increasingly treats connections as disposable and transactional, the owl stands as a stoic guardian of loyalty. It teaches us that a great partnership isn't built on fleeting passion, but on daily, unyielding reliability. It is the active choice to show up, protect the nest, hunt for one another, and sing into the darkness together, ensuring that neither of you ever has to navigate the cold night alone. Look at an owl, and what does your mind instantly see? Do you see a wise, noble scholar wearing an invisible pair of spectacles, guarding the lost secrets of ancient libraries? Or do you feel a sudden, ancient chill run down your spine, viewing the bird as a silent omen of death, a shape-shifting witch, or a direct messenger from the underworld? No other animal in the history of the world has polarized human psychology quite like the owl. It is a creature trapped in a perpetual cultural paradox, serving as a blank canvas for our highest human aspirations and our darkest, most primitive fears. Throughout history, human civilizations have split completely down the middle regarding the spiritual and symbolic nature of the owl. In ancient Greece, the little owl was the sacred companion of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, tactical strategy, and radar-sharp intellect. To see an owl fly over a Greek army before a battle was considered an omen of absolute victory and divine favor. It represented the light of conscious knowledge piercing the heavy darkness of human ignorance. However, cross the Atlantic Ocean or shift the timeline, and the narrative completely flips into a horror story. In ancient Aztec, Mayan, and Roman cultures, the owl was a terrifying harbinger of catastrophic doom. A widespread Roman superstition claimed that an owl perching on a residential rooftop and hooting predicted an imminent death in that household. A myth that history books seemingly vindicated when owls allegedly hooted from public buildings prior to the assassinations of Julius Caesar and Augustus. In many traditional African and Native American heritages, the owl is deeply feared as a vehicle for sorcery, a restless spirit of the dead lingering between worlds, or an executioner sent by the cosmos. The owl itself never altered its behavior across these centuries. It simply flew silently and stared with large, unblinking eyes. Humans took that silence and projected their own internal mythologies onto it. This profound cultural paradox ultimately says far less about the biology of the owl and far more about the fluid complexity of human nature. The owl is the ultimate mirror for our relationship with the unknown. When we are feeling secure, intellectually curious, and spiritually grounded, we look into the darkness of the night and see wisdom, the majestic ability to perceive what is hidden from ordinary sight. But when we are anxious, guilt-ridden, or terrified of things outside our conscious control, we look at that exact same darkness and project death, evil, and bad omens. The owl reminds us that the world outside us is often just a direct reflection of our internal psychological state. The attributes we assign to people, situations, or challenges are frequently born from our own biases and fears. By sitting quietly through all our historical stories, completely unbothered by whether humanity labels it a demon or a god, the owl teaches us the ultimate form of wisdom: how to remain completely anchored in your true nature, independent of how a shifting, fickle, and emotional world chooses to perceive you. If you walk into a dense forest at dusk, you might look up and feel a sense of peace. But if you are a red-tailed hawk, a peregrine falcon, or even a wild raccoon, that peace is a complete illusion. You are entering a combat zone ruled by an absolute tyrant. We often think of lions, wolves, and eagles as the undisputed kings of their respective domains. But there is a silent, feathered tank in the night sky that doesn't care about royal titles. It hunts the things that hunt everything else. Meet the great horned owl, the apex predator that keeps other apex predators awake at night. The great horned owl is frequently referred to by biologists as the tiger of the air, and for very good reason. They are incredibly large, powerful raptors with a wingspan that can easily top 5 feet. What makes them uniquely terrifying in the animal kingdom is their absolute lack of dietary specialization or fear. They will attack, kill, and consume almost any living creature that steps, crawls, or flies across their path. While most predators actively avoid fighting other carnivores to prevent sustaining injuries, the great horned owl actively targets them. They regularly raid the nests of bald eagles and peregrine falcons. They will snatch crows straight off their sleeping perches in the middle of the night. Even heavily armed land mammals are not safe. A great horned owl will casually swoop down and lift an adult porcupine right off the ground, executing it with their crushing 500 psi talon grip despite a face full of razor-sharp quills. They are also one of the only consistent predators of skunks in the entire world. They possess an immense physical resilience. Individuals have been found perfectly healthy with multiple porcupine quills embedded in their chests or smelling intensely of skunk spray, completely unbothered by the defense mechanisms that paralyze the rest of the forest. There is a raw, unapologetic lessons in the fierce existence of the great horned owl. It is an animal that refuses to be intimidated by the reputation of its environment. It doesn't look at a porcupine's quills or a hawk's talons and see an impossible barrier. It sees a challenge that can be overcome with total commitment and sheer force of will. In our human lives, we are often surrounded by obstacles that look terrifyingly sharp. We see industry competitors, personal challenges, or sudden life crises that seem to possess too many defenses for us to handle. We shrink back, convincing ourselves that we are not strong enough or equipped enough to venture into those dangerous spaces. The great horned owl reminds us of the dormant, indomitable strength we all carry within ourselves. Teaches us that you don't have to live your life running away from the hard things. Sometimes, to survive and thrive in a cutthroat world, you have to find your inner tiger. You have to be willing to take on the heavy, messy, and intimidating challenges head-on, trusting that your internal grip and resilience are vastly more powerful than any external thorns the world tries to throw at you. Imagine a traveler who can walk into almost any country on Earth, find a home, understand the local rhythm, and thrive immediately without ever needing a passport, a translation guide, or permission. Humans spend billions of dollars building global networks, learning multiple languages, and trying to adapt to different climates just to feel at home across the globe. Yet, a single, pale, hard-faced bird has quietly achieved total planetary conquest without ever making a fuss about it. The barn owl is the ultimate ghost of the globe, a universal citizen that has found a way to belong everywhere. The barn owl, Tyto alba, is one of the most widely distributed land bird species on the entire face of the planet. Aside from a few desert regions, the dense depths of the Amazon rainforest, and the frozen expanse of Antarctica, you can find the exact same barn owl flying over the countryside of England, the grasslands of India, the outback of Australia, the savannas of Africa, and the farmlands of North America. How did a single species manage to conquer nearly every continent without diverging into completely different animals? The secret lies in their unparalleled biological versatility. The barn owl is an evolutionary masterpiece of design. Their hunting efficiency is so perfectly streamlined that as long as an environment contains open ground and a steady population of small rodents, the barn owl can successfully set up a kingdom. Furthermore, they have formed a brilliant, unspoken alliance with human civilization. While many wild animals retreat and go extinct when humans build cities and clear forests for agriculture, the barn owl leaned in. They realized that human farms attract massive populations of mice and rats, and human structures like barns, abandoned silos, church steeples, and underbridge girders provide the perfect, safe, elevated nesting platforms. By tying their destiny to the expansion of humanity, barn owls effectively piggybacked on our global growth, turning our agricultural footprint into their personal hunting paradise. The planetary journey of the barn owl holds a profound lesson about what it truly means to belong. Many of us spend our entire lives feeling like outsiders, searching for the perfect location, the perfect community, or the perfect set of circumstances that will finally make us feel accepted and grounded. We mistake belonging for a physical place. The barn owl teaches us that true belonging is not about changing your outer coordinates. It is about cultivating an internal set of skills that allows you to adapt to any environment life drops you into. The barn owl doesn't ask the world to alter its climate or its architecture to fit its needs. It simply flies in, finds a quiet corner in a human barn, and gets to work. It reminds us that we are all inherently universal citizens of this earth. No matter where you find yourself tomorrow, whether you are starting a new job in a foreign city, navigating a completely unfamiliar social circle, or rebuilding your life from scratch, you possess the deep, internal resilience to build a home. You carry your roots within you. Like the barn owl, your value and your purpose are not dictated by the geography outside you, but by the quiet, steady focus you bring to the dark spaces you choose to inhabit. We live in a culture that treats any form of physical deficit as an absolute tragedy. We are conditioned to believe that to be successful, powerful, and complete, we must possess every single advantage, every single sense, and every single capability functioning at a flawless maximum capacity. If a piece is missing, we view it as a profound flaw. But nature operates on a vastly more elegant, unexpected logic. In the evolutionary history of the owl, a complete biological failing, the near total destruction of their sense of smell, became the exact key that unlocked an exclusive, highly lucrative dietary superpower that no other predator wanted. If you look at the brain anatomy of an owl, you will find something highly unusual for a bird of prey. Their olfactory bulb, the region of the brain responsible for processing scents, is extraordinarily small and underdeveloped. For all practical purposes, owls are completely nose-blind. They cannot smell the fresh pine needles of the forest, the sweetness of a morning bloom, or the foul, suffocating stench of decay. To a human observer, this seems like a sad evolutionary oversight. Why would a master hunter be deprived of such a critical tracking tool? But this structural deficit is actually an incredible competitive masterstroke. Because they cannot smell a single thing, owls are uniquely capable of exploiting an abundant, highly nutritious food resource that other forest predators avoid like the plague: the striped skunk. When a fox, a wolf, or a hawk encounters a skunk, the skunk's chemical weapon, a foul, oily spray packed with sulfur-based compounds, is devastating. It can blind an attacker temporarily and cause severe respiratory distress, and the smell lingers for weeks, ruining the predator's ability to stalk other prey. But a great horned owl doesn't care. It swoops down from the night sky, completely immune to the toxic spray, and executes the skunk seamlessly. In fact, skunks make up a massive percentage of the winter diet for many owl populations. By giving up a sense that it didn't strictly need for survival, the owl gained exclusive access to an entire menu that its competitors were too terrified to touch. The nose blindness of the owl is a beautiful, deeply comforting metaphor for our own perceived shortcomings. We all have things we feel we are missing. We look at our peers and envy their social ease, their financial starts, their natural talents, or their flawless backgrounds. We focus so heavily on our underdeveloped olfactory bulbs, the things we lack, that we fall into the trap of feeling inadequate and broken. The owl forces us to turn that perspective completely on its head. It shows us that sometimes a missing piece is actually a hidden protection. Sometimes Not having a certain sensitivity allows you to walk straight into environments and tackle challenges that would completely overwhelm or paralyze everyone else. Your unique limitations can be the exact parameters that define your competitive edge. If you are less sensitive to criticism, you can create bolder art. If you didn't grow up with easy options, you develop a ruthless, unbreakable work ethic. Stop apologizing for the things you lack, and stop viewing your unique deficits as a lifelong sentence of failure. Embrace your specific design. Find the skunks in your own life, the messy, difficult, or highly avoided opportunities that others run away from because they smell too bad or look too hard, and claim them as your own exclusive path to victory. When you picture an owl, your eyes instinctively climb upward toward the sky. You imagine a winged phantom cutting through the midnight fog, or a silent shape scanning the forest floor from high atop an ancient oak. But if you could step into a time machine and travel back thousands of years to the primeval, isolated forests of the Caribbean, you wouldn't want to look at the trees to find the ultimate predator. You would need to look directly at the ground right in front of your feet, because sprinting through the dense, dark brush was a monstrous owl that stood over 3 feet tall, couldn't fly, and possessed powerful legs engineered to chase down its prey like a modern-day cheetah. This prehistoric marvel is known to science as Ornithomegalonyx, commonly referred to as the Cuban giant owl. Living during the late Pleistocene epoch, it holds the undisputed title of the largest owl to have ever walked the face of the earth. Standing at a staggering 3.6 feet tall and weighing over 20 pounds, it completely shattered the traditional blueprint of what a bird of prey is supposed to look like. Because it evolved on an island with virtually no large predatory mammals, the laws of natural selection shifted dramatically. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the Cuban giant owl underwent a biological phenomenon known as island gigantism. But as its body grew larger and heavier, its wings did not keep pace. Its wings were drastically reduced, becoming far too small to ever lift its massive frame into sustained, soaring flight. Instead of flying, Ornithomegalonyx became cursorial, meaning it adapted entirely for a running lifestyle on the forest floor. It possessed exceptionally long, deeply muscled legs and massive, heavy talons that functioned more like the legs of an extinct terror bird or a modern-day cassowary. Biologists believe it was an explosive ambush sprinter. It would crouch down in the pitch-black shadows of the dense Cuban undergrowth, using its hyper-acute, satellite-dish facial disc to listen for the rustle of giant prehistoric rodents and ground sloths. The moment it locked onto its target, it would launch into a rapid, terrifying sprint, or use its residual wings to make massive, bounding leaps through the air, crashing down upon its prey with the full force of its immense body weight, crushing it instantly beneath its feet. There is a powerful, liberating truth hidden in the evolutionary history of the Cuban giant owl. To the modern observer, a bird that loses its ability to fly looks like an object of tragedy. We view flight as the ultimate achievement of a bird, and giving it up looks like a massive step backward, a failure of potential. But the owl shows us that true adaptation requires the courage to let go of conventional gifts to master a completely new terrain. Ornithomegalonyx didn't fail because it couldn't fly. It realized that in its specific environment, the sky was empty and useless, but the ground was where the true harvest lay.